Hello, everybody. Oh my God, this is a big public. Thank you for being here. I would like to invite my partners in crime, the panelists, to join me here on stage. And while we are doing that, and we should have Alexis, hello, Thomas, Przemysław, come and join us. I know it's not easy. Can we help? No. Thank you. So while you are doing that, please do, we'll start with a little exercise. We would like this not to be just a panel discussion. Is Magda here? Yes. Hello. Welcome. Fantastic. So what will happen here is that we would like you to take part in this work. And I think we should see that on the screen. Here we go. Take your phone and please do help us with the Mentimeter. Who are you? So that's the first thing. And while you are doing that and we are taking a temperature of who you are, and there would be other questions in a few moments, I would like to ask my guests to also very briefly introduce themselves, who you are, your name, your organization, what is the broad stakeholder group. We start with that and then we go to the questions. Shall we start with you?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Przemysław Pilaszek. I'm currently the CEO of Filiklo, which has a product in almost the phase 1 of clinical trials in oncology. And this is our main focus right now. So for now, maybe it's enough. Thank you.
Thomas?
Yeah, hello everybody. It's loud. Really a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I'm Thomas. I'm Director Global Pricing and Market Access in Medag, a mid-sized pharmaceutical company in the northern part of Germany. We are developing orphan drugs and also cell therapy. But today I'm not here as an industry specialist. I'm representing the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies, which is a multi-stakeholder alliance representing patients, physicians, researchers, and also industry. We are advocating for timely access to safe ATMPs and some other things, and we are supported by an interest group of members of European Parliament.
Thank you. Alexis?
Hello everybody, thank you for the organizer for this invitation. I was afraid first because I saw just one word, and to summarize myself in one word is quite challenging, but in few words, so I'm Alexis Bitton. I'm in charge of international relations for Genopole. Genopole is a bio-cluster. We are located south in Paris. We help make the connection between the research and the market. And I'm also coordinator of the European project COBIOE, which aim at interconnecting ecosystem of innovation in the biomanufacturing system ecosystem.
Thank you. And Magda?
It's a pleasure to meet you all. Magda Kulczycka. I'm representing the Bio-Forum, the Association of Biotechnology Companies. We support Polish biotech companies in many, many ways. One of them is public affairs and either Polish or European level, together with our friends from Europa Bio, because we are a member of Europa Bio as well. Moreover, we are creating networks between Polish biotech companies and international partners through either our annual conference, CE Bio-Forum, held every year in Warsaw, or during international events in US and other European countries as well. So that's it.
Thank you so much. And because one Magda on the panel is not enough, my name is Magda Chlebus, and I'm from FPA, the European Federation of Pharma Industry, where I'm leading the science and regulatory team, and amongst many other things, also supporting the pharmaceutical industry to create a pre-competitive space in the context of the Innovative Health Initiative, which you had seen quite extensively with Niklas Blomberg's presentation. And what we are going to do together, so now you see who is in the room, and we have innovation catalysts, scientists, biotech representatives, pharma industry, a lot of scientists, molecular scientists, business development, and well, actually the entire ecosystem. Other patients in the room, just to check. It's called Bio-Pharma biotech. Of course, there are patients in the room. obviously.
They're in the other room.
In the other room. Great. So what we're going to do, and I would just tell you briefly what we're trying to do today. So we will talk about what are the key success factors for addressing some of the challenges that we heard about in the morning session today. I think the diagnosis has been done. We can do a little bit more of venting because this is how it goes usually. Europe is slow. I love the presentation from with the snail and showing how Europe looks like. I think what I would like to say is that today Europe has a fantastic science. That's true for Poland, Krakow. It's true for any other country. We have fantastic healthcare systems as well. The problem is the journey from the science to the healthcare systems and the time it takes to get there. So what I would like to ask you again, using the Mentimeter, where do you think the biggest challenges are? And we are going to look at these challenges, but more importantly at solutions and key success factors. The venting was done this morning. Now we are turning to solutions. And please tell us, where do you think the biggest challenge is? And I would start already, Magda, with you. Where is the biggest challenge and what is the critical success factors for getting out of the problems?
I know it may be not very politically correct, but I would say it's a trust that is a major issue. And it's a trust between academia and industry that we are, because if you think about it, they're going in the same direction, right? They have the same goal, but nevertheless, they somehow, it's so difficult, the communication about conditions and how to reach this goal. So I would say it's, of course, they're talking different languages, different terms, and so on and so forth. But if there's this will to find the solution and the trust that the counterpart is thinking in the same direction, then it's doable, definitely. And of course, then we could complain about not enough funds for breaking the Death Valley, but I would say that, sorry, there are funds for that. I think that there are a lot of programs that facilitate this process, and there's only the matter of how devoted you are to bring your solution to the market, and that's it. Sorry.
I would be asking the question also to the public, and please be ready because we would like to have this conversation together with you, not just amongst us. But you know, I always have this reflection, if it is so good, then why is it so slow? So I think our panel today and our conversation should be about not only what we need, but also how to apply it in order to accelerate. Because as Commissioner Vaheli said a few days ago in one of his communications, Europe needs to be bolder, faster, simpler. So faster and simpler resonates quite well with me in order to accelerate the change. Alexis, how about you?
So I can see that there are 5 items. We could check all of them, of course. I will try to be politically correct compared to you.
You don't need to.
I'm joking, but no, I would say we could specifically point out the late-stage investment, of course, but why lack of late-stage investment from private venture, for instance? We can think of the return on investment, the risk. So how do you diminish the risk for the companies, for the capital investment? There are many ways to do so. So that's why, as ecosystem of innovation, we try at early stage to support the companies as much as we can, to provide them with the elements they would need, and they would not need to look somewhere else. For instance, we can talk about pilot infrastructure. This is sometimes tremendous investment, equipment for the companies. So I think the local can focus on that, the local ecosystems. There is also one aspect, maybe we'll go more into details, but there is the skills shortage, because it's a quick evolving field. I can speak for France, for instance. We lack a lot of technicians to operate the machine in our factories, because this domain, this sector, have been kind of under-diminished by our culture. Being a technician is not really valorized. So we can talk about a lot of different aspects. So I can say that translational research, so the tech transfer, to facilitate the transfer between the research to the innovation, facilitated by equipment, so by investment in equipment. So if you have to decide as a public fund where to invest, you could invest in equipment and not just distribute the money everywhere. And at the European level, I would say that we are too, let's say, diverse and sparse. We need to specialize between the territories. This is some findings that we have found in this project, is that all the ecosystems want the same things. They want to build factories to produce, but they don't look elsewhere, so they can face a lot of competition. And I will finish, Magda, I'm sorry. But we have CDMOs on site because our local government incentive for those CDMOs. But at the end, will they find the market? And we see that now we have overcapacities in some specific drugs. And it was also public investment, not only public investment, but that means the public invested and increased the capacities, industrial capacities, which not find its market. And this is a huge issue because it could have been prioritized somewhere else. Yeah, but there's a lot of things to say.
Fascinating, but I'll challenge you in a second because I think it's all good, but is that good enough in order to get us out of all the valleys of debt that we've discussed today? You've said there is enough funding. You've said we can work on maybe accelerating and improving technology transfer. Would that help closing the translational research gap? I'll come to that in a second. Before that, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much, Magda. I'm an industry guy. I'm not well known for being politically correct, so we are always asking for money. I said it to you in the morning, Europe needs to put more money on the table. This is definitely an issue. The US is investing heavily. We saw this morning that the US is, even though they are investing heavily, is losing ground towards China. So we need to be very careful not to lose our position we currently have. I've been for 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, 2 weeks missing. And over the 3 decades, I saw how the position of the European industry in Europe declined. And going back even further, the EU and Europe was very well known as the pharmacy of the world. What we are currently facing is bureaucracy. What we are currently facing is a system which is not facilitating innovation, and a system in the EU which is very much fragmented, which is highly complex. So, for instance, the medical device regulation and the IVD regulation, those are more or less governed by Brussels, but in the implementation, different countries added something here and something there. For a pharmaceutical company, if you want to develop a product in this system, of course, when you want to sell it later on, or earlier, when you want to do clinical trials in different countries, you have to fill all those different requirements, which is, of course, very difficult and in the end costly. And other things, also fragmentation, which is leading to trouble, is we are talking about, or I am talking about ATMP developers today. There are ATMPs which are available in some countries, but not available in all countries. And this is not because the countries don't want to pay for that or because the health technology assessment didn't work. This is because it's a very special treatment which can only be assessed in a single hospital or a few hospitals in Europe. And when you live as a patient in a country where this treatment is not available, you would have to go there. We call this cross-border healthcare. There's a directive on that or a regulation. I'm not an expert on those things. I have to say it doesn't work. It works for me. coming here for business when I break my leg, when I jump out of the bar in the night, but it doesn't work in those cases, and we have to work on that. And last but not least, again, industry guy in market access and pricing and reimbursement. Europe is very fragmented in health technology assessment systems. We have, if we take, let's say, EEA, about 30 countries, and what we are currently doing under the EU HTA regulation is we do a joint clinical assessment, so we are assessing just the clinical studies in common, and all the rest will be done in the respective countries, which is for us from industry still very challenging because we have to fulfill different requirements of 27 countries. I can tell you this costs a lot of time, costs a lot of money, and also leads to sometimes, unfortunately, that we have to skip out some of the countries because they are economically not feasible. This is not good for the society, this is not good for the patients, and of course we from industry also don't like the situation.
Thank you. I would be asking those of you who put, for example, the 18 people who said a regulatory is a problem, if you could comment after Przemek about what do you think is the solution to that regulatory problem. But before we get there, your turn.
Okay, it will be very hard, but...
Let's think about the solutions as well.
Solutions. Okay, so these challenges that are here are not challenges at all. The biggest challenge is, okay, from my point of view as a small company and a startup, let's say, it's money. But I'm not worried about money because money can be found anywhere if you are good. And the real problem is European officials. We are hearing all the day, more regulations, more internationalization, more cooperation, yeah, and everything we got is more citations. Yeah, this is the way, and we are hearing it for the last 25 years, and nothing has changed. We started our company in 1998, the first company. For several years, we were a CRO for international companies from America, not for Europe, for Pfizer, Takeda, San Diego, Polish Pharma, and many others. And we learned medicinal chemistry. We learned how world works, and Europe is completely opposite. And if we are hearing that, okay, we have enormous program, that we have 7 years of predicted funding, yeah, but it's like swimming with a tanker. You cannot move a little bit if the environment change. We are not prepared for fast moves. And the collaboration, let me show anyone from the biggest companies in the world, Bezos, Gates, Brin, or people from Apple, do they collaborated before they created this company? No, because if I see myself with my ideas and my interpretation of some research that we are doing in the huge panel of real scientists, they will outvote me because I'm stupid. I should not do this. It has no sense. Yeah, we need really mad people to move these things forward, and they need funding. So the first thing is Europe needs to take a risk. We need to stop focusing on being, okay, we have great institution, great scientists. No, come on, let's focus on what's exceeding this whole idea of European Union. And this is, I think, main message of this.
Thank you. So I think you shook the tree a little bit, and let's continue the conversation. Basically, if you would say, we are going to write a report at the end with a series of recommendations that would go to the European Commission in the context of the LifeScience strategy conversation. You are all invited to contribute to that endeavor. So now, if there was one recommendation that you would make in order to solve the problem that you've just explained, what that solution would be? What do you want from the European Union or from national governments, by the way, in order to resolve the problem that you've just mentioned? And then I'll do the round, but would also turn to colleagues here. And please feel free to raise your hand if there is a challenge or a solution that you want to be included in the report and that you feel would really move the supertanker of the European Union. Then let's have this conversation and let's record that. Przemek, could I start with you? And then I would go to Magda.
Okay, so maybe the idea would be if we are creating so many regulations, so the fastest way to learn these people where we are is let them create some kind of office that will support the small companies that are not capable of dealing with all these instructions, regulations, frameworks to help us. That I would like it to call like integrated permission. So they create for us the documents they are needed to permit us for something. They will very fast see where's the problem for small biotechs to grow fast and efficiently, not losing all the steam to deal with the bureaucracy.
The EU has just created the European Biotech Hub. Who knows about that European Biotech Hub by raise of hands? Claire, of course, you do. And you as well. But actually only two in a quite large room. And this hub is supposed to do exactly what you've just expressed. But who knows about it? And who knows that it exists? And is it doing really what you've expressed? I don't know. Claire, could you confirm?
Sorry. I would say it's a good start, but what it started as doing is just linking together what is already there. It hasn't brought anything new. So I think it's got a little while to go, but it's, you know, it's a journey.
Okay, so as always, there is a great intent, but then the implementation, can I be politically incorrect, sucks, sort of? Okay, let's go then to the funding. Magda, if I may invite you.
I will just continue on what you said, Claire, that it's a journey. And at the same time, there's no time to go along the journey, right? I mean, this world is changing so fast, and I'm not talking about only, I mean, the pandemic has shown us that we need to think like, the problem is here, we need to find a solution right now. And not as I think it was Natalie Moll who mentioned today that it's like, and then we are start to think about the regulations, and I'm like, what? It's far too late. What I even sent it recently to Claire that in US it's a different mentality. They have a problem, they act on it. They don't deliberate. They don't create regulations. They act on it right and on a very basic level, even. You know, like it was Iran today who mentioned also that we need to educate citizens about innovations and like what kind of benefits they get from the innovations. And what is done in US? The scientists are publishing about innovation in local newspapers. Hello, how many articles about innovations you found in your local newspaper recently? None. So I would say that we need to, in order to increase the speed, I would also agree with Przemek that we need the flexibility that would address as a solution for funding and the funding programs, they need to be more flexible. We're talking about public-private partnerships, right? Great. Private venture capitalists, they would partner with very solid programs designed by European Union. Very difficult for them because they need to, company needs to react on the change of the market. They can't wait for the programs to be changed. So, sorry.
So the solution, basically, what we are saying, the ask to the European Union is act faster, stop doing endless consultations, stop thinking about a new regulation, but maybe implement what you have and do it faster. Is that what you're saying?
But Natalie also mentioned today very well that do the consultations, so do the consultations, of course, because that's the basics of European Union, but then create the regulation, because once the regulation is done, it's very difficult to change it. And I fully agree with her.
Everybody in agreement with that? Yes? Who disagrees? Okay, everybody agrees. So at least we have one clear recommendation, Magda, 1 point. Alexi.
when I hear the other panelists, and I can see that we have the usual suspects, so we can talk about the bureaucracy, we can talk about the lack of efficiency, the disconnection also of the public with the innovation, the entrepreneurship. But let's remind that we are 27 states. It is difficult to achieve the single market, and it's one of the mandate from the Commission to achieve a single market. I'm not sure it will be possible on the health sector. It's not really a competence from the European Union. So there is also at the national and local level to work on this. I would say that for me, the role of if we are focusing on the public aspect, the role of the public is to facilitate and to fill up the gaps that are not met by the private sector. So my recommendation would be to prioritize, as I said, the investment in sector where the private cannot act because there are too many risks, because there are no return on investment, and let the entrepreneurs work, facilitate their work in that way. When we are talking about biomanufacturing, what we have seen is that we have different levels in Europe. We have interviewed several ecosystems everywhere. So I'm talking about ecosystems. Some of them are private, some of them are non-for-profit, different stage. But we can see that there is maybe 8-9 countries that really have biomanufacturing sector well developed. So there is no sense in spreading and distributing the money everywhere. You need to specialize the regions on their strength, to identify the gaps where, as I said, the private sector cannot act, and to facilitate also the cooperation between the public and private. We have several startups, we have incubator, accelerator, some of them are spin-off of research centers, and I can say that some of them were successful, it worked. They came from an idea. It was a scientist, and then we matched them with an entrepreneur's more private profile, and it worked very well. So one of the Draghi's report said that one of the strengths of the European Union is the academic scientific base. So let's capitalize also on this, and I agree, of course, with the efficiency, but maybe it should be done more on the local and national level. Prioritize again, because we cannot all do the same. Public money, if you compete with each other, it's a waste of money sometimes. So it's also a problem. When we interviewed the different ecosystems, we see all of them had as guidelines to increase the investment in these industries, production plants, CDMOs has to be. All of them should attract investment, industrial investment, but sometimes you wonder if you have the assets to attract, and maybe you should specialize in something else. And I think this is really the role of the European Union and the national authorities to structure this better.
Simpler, faster, bolder. I would like to highlight again the words of Commissioner Varhelyi, and maybe to turn a little bit to the faster, because I think we are talking about tweaking the edges quite honestly, but if we had to bring an acceleration of everything that is going on, what would you do, or what would you need from the European Union in order to accelerate? I start with the public, and then let's turn to the panel.
Thanks a lot. Anton Ussi from IATRIS. We are a European infrastructure for translational medicine, so we support, on average, about 150 projects a year, trying to traverse the valley of death. And the single biggest thing that kills our ability to innovate, we think, is that public money in the early phases is being dressed as translational, but we're getting publications, we're not getting exploitable data. The data journey is a very long journey with many stakeholders. It's like a relay race, but research funders are still funding it like it's a single sprint to the end of that project. If we can bring the funders together longitudinally, give them access to the trusted third parties who understand the business of that specific gene therapy or medicine development, and help them review the projects better, monitor them, and look at the exploitability of the outcomes, not only the publishability, then we could do things much faster because we're linking up all the different value elements in the chain.
connectivity between programs, more agility and funding at milestones rather than trying to do everything in one go. I think that everybody agrees. We are still talking a lot about the research funding, how to get venture capital, how to get access to money, how to get access to funding. I'd like to talk also a little bit about who here is doing clinical trials. What do you think about the speed of approvals of clinical trials in Europe, and what would need to be done in order to change this?
You know, it's relatively slow, and it's very obvious. But I would like to address the previous conversation, and we still have a tendency to tinker in the engine and say we need to tweak that to be a little bit faster and so on. And the situation looks complicated. Engine is a very complicated machine, and from the inside, it looks that we actually don't know what to do. But let's look from the outside. So it's a race. Europe is in a race. And we have basically US, China, and European Union. Of course, there are other actors, but we in Europe put a car into the race. And it's a diesel engine, 2-liter, because there are regulations. It's complicated. It's eco-friendly. It has been designed by several teams of engineers. So yeah, it looks like a car, and it's probably, let's call it as a Volkswagen, and it's good. And the US, they put a V8 muscle car that uses a lot of gas, but it's fast. And the US has a fleet, China has a fleet of electric cars and their own atomic power plant. And this is how we are going to compete. And right now we are tweaking maybe, you know, the injection, the valves in our engine, but we probably need to think about designing the other car.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Magda.
Can I relate?
Thomas and Przemek.
But this is for me, this is a story about the consistency of what European Union wants. It's like, okay, you want to be competitive on global scale, all right, but the single actions and regulations that are being like as should be as guidance for reaching this this goal, they are like they're those little valves, changing of those little valves, and they don't align with the goal itself. Okay, maybe you don't agree. Maybe it's a bigger discussion. I will let Thomas also relate to, but.
I think we will get there. It's good that we have a debate. Thomas and then Przemek.
I'm not sure if I can give you the new car, but I have the kind of similar thinking. So we are tweaking here and tweaking there currently. We are trying to improve research. We're trying to improve the transfer from research to development and so on and so on. So have in mind or thinking that probably in 10 years we would have a perfect environment and we would be able to create the best drugs under the world. This is what we need to supply to our patients and to treat our patients. And now look at the situation, how it is currently. The good, the innovative, the very well working drugs are usually not invented in Europe. Okay, we could change this, but what happens after they are invented? They are not used in Europe because of our strict funding systems. I'm talking about pricing and reimbursement, not about funding research. So we are, so to say, developing a Ferrari, but we don't want to pay it. So now think about in 10 years, we would probably have a very well development system, you doing your clinical trials, we from industry creating products, which would very well work. But they will not be available in the EU if we don't change the pricing and reimbursement system. So we have to think completely out of the box. We have to change this system because all those things only work when we can also use those things in practice. And there's also at least a small way out of crisis, which I see what could be done on EU level. In the EU HTA regulation, we are several, or all the time you hear about EU HTA regulation. In fact, we don't have an EU health technology assessment. We have a joint clinical assessment. All the rest is done in the countries. But in the EU HTA regulation, there is also a sentence somewhere about voluntary corroboration. We should use this, or the EU could use this to put cooperations together where the countries could work together on streamlining the systems, modifying the systems slightly to achieve a better harmonized system. I think this would be a way out of the crisis and hopefully a bit more of a revolution than simply tweaking things.
And by the way, the same is true for the clinical trials regulation, which also says that if country wanted, they could actually rely on one another, collaborate, have one approval. It doesn't mean that every country needs to approve separately. It's just not used. So more Europe in Europe, I think that's what we are all saying, right? More reliance, more collaboration, not only between researchers, but also between countries. More trust and more willing to be one and act as one. I think that's what I'm hearing and translating. But Przemek, your take on what is the solution to actually accelerate the car and the speed?
I have no idea. Really, my solution was to, I heard about, forget about Poland, forget about EU. So last year I traveled to UK and I created a company there. Then I was in the United States. And every investor I talked with, and okay, so if you are acquiring our money, we would like you to put in one of these really important markets like London or Nasdaq. So, nevertheless, what we are doing here, we will end up outside of the European Union because we don't have even a market that is worth for investors to be on. Yeah, so this is another danger. So even if we create something, we change something right here, right now in this scientific level, we have also other obstacles that these developments cannot be done or cached here in Europe because it will be delivered somewhere else or for people in the Middle East who wants to pay for these projects. And they will end up in United States, United Kingdom, or in the Middle East. And this is the huge danger, I think. So no matter what we will do right now, this will be only the one part of the puzzle. So we have to have a, let's say, holistic view of how we create innovations, how we treat them for all the process till the market, and let's say we need to get the funding back. So what we will do in this moment when we would like to have a cash from it.
I think the current situation globally, what's happening in the US, what's happening in China, is telling us that there is a need to react. When we are speaking with CEOs of larger companies and we ask them, what do we need in order to make Europe attractive and for them to stay, to maintain their investments or even to bring new investments into Europe, they basically say, we want to have a fast environment, so the rapidity and the speed. Clinical trials need to be approved very quickly. We need to have a regulatory system which values innovation and which helps and supports innovation. I mean, it's not a surprise that oftentimes companies go first to the FDA rather than to the EMA. Maybe the situation would change over the next years, but still the FDA has the resources. It's not about the quality. We have a fantastic regulatory network, but there are no resources to provide continued support to companies as the FDA does. So speed, market, because you do the innovation, but if you don't have the market, then why do you do the innovation? I think everybody said that, and it is the willingness to absorb the innovations. I think you've said something about the HTA regulation, which is not yet implemented as it should, and I think that's where we are struggling. We have good intents, good legislations, but we still have a complicated Europe. So I think that what could Europe do is to just act more as one and to do everything from the funding tools through the legislation to the regulations and their implementation in order to achieve that. But I think that's what common sense says now.
If I may relate to this functioning as a one, just like you said, Alexis, it will be very difficult because at the very end of the day, each country would like to work for its own for its own economy.
I think we all agree that this is the risk. This being said, I think, and again, I would like to challenge both the panelists and the public and to ask you what you think about it. I think that today, Europe is an interesting market for the 450 million people if it acts as one, because fragmented markets are not interesting. Therefore, it is in our interest not only to compete, because we understand that there is a competition, but also to collaborate and to create that market, right? So there is a momentum. Alexis?
But the question, Magda, would be, will we ever be able to achieve the single market in the healthcare sector? Because if you have different health system, insurance systems, it may be difficult rather than in other sector or other field. If we are talking about competitiveness of startups, the industry is something else. You can have investors from the US, from China, from Korea, from Japan, and it can remain in Europe. I have some examples. We've got Korean investor who invested 600 million in one of our startups, not startups, SMEs. It's possible, but so the problem is not only being able to achieve the single market in Europe, it's to make the companies competitive.
I guess maybe I was misunderstood because I know that we have 27 healthcare systems and we are not going to have one. We are not going to have one approval in one country and everybody else reimbursing the drug. That clearly is not going to happen. But I think that on certain elements like clinical trials, like ethical reviews, like regulatory processes, we can dramatically speed up. And also if we have a will to reward innovation and to reimburse innovation, if our objective is to not only create innovation in Europe, but make it available to patients, I think that is already step one. While today we are hearing a little bit of a contradiction. Do it here, but there is no money to reimburse it. And I think this contradiction makes it really difficult for investors to sort of relate to the...
That's what I was relating to about this consistency in Europe. Like, you're saying A, all right, then you need to say B down to Z.
So recommendation number one is consistency of goals. So that's already the first thing.
And follow with actions.
With actions. Do what you say. Yes, absolutely. Alex.
And who pays for it?
I think that it's not my solution, but what is important is to start thinking about maybe new payment and new models for making innovation and new solutions available to the patient. So I think there is a need for reflection. Thomas.
And to add on that, who pays for that, we are supplying with our company about 90 countries worldwide. We don't have affiliates in all those countries, but we have partner countries. So we are talking about the EU and someone from the EU funding all the system. When we have a good product which we can sell to Japan, to the Arab countries, to the US, Canada, Latin America, and so on, our industry will make benefit and profit from that. They will keep the employees in labor, will pay taxes. They will go to the shop, pay value-added taxes there, and so on. I've never done a calculation if you will get all your money back, but at least a part will be done, and it will definitely help the patients in the EU.
Thank you very much, everybody, for this great discussion. I'm not sure we have the solutions, but I think we have a start of a solution, and I'd like to encourage you to continue this conversation over coffee. And please come to me, because I would be one of those trying to capture the recommendations for tomorrow. Thank you very much, and thanks for the panelists. Please help me to thank our panelists. So it's me again. Hello, but half of the room went for a coffee. However, I'm inviting my panelists to join me. Marta, please join me on stage. Thank you. And Jeremy, Tomasz, and Dominik Lipka. Welcome. Actually, we sort of know each other, but not really, just by email. So please bear with us. We are going to have a similar structure to the previous one, but I think we are just going to continue the conversation, if you agree, because I have the impression that we didn't get to the solutions. So I would like to continue discussing until we have a solution. But of course, before we get to the solutions, maybe to help us a little bit, I would like to ask you just one question. First, we are going to do a short round of introductions, really short. You name your organization, who you represent, and then we would go to that question, so start thinking about it. How does good look like? So what is it that we are trying to achieve by doing what we are doing? Because I think that sometimes without knowing where we go, it's really difficult to say what the solution is and how we measure progress. So before we start talking about the key performance indicators, for which we have 40 minutes, the organizers ate 5 minutes from our time, which is very, very frustrating because we only have 40 minutes, but yet I think we can do it well. So we'll start with you, who you are.
Dominik Lipka. I have pleasure to represent Saivento Biotech. Saivento is a CDMO that is mainly focusing on development and clinical production, mRNA-based drug.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Yes, I'm Jeremy Launders. I'm CEO and President of the Management Board at Biotechnology SA.
Welcome, Tomasz.
Tomasz Dylong, European Commission Director General for Research and Innovation. So I have basically two functions. One is the policy making in research and innovation in health, and also designing the funding policy in plenty of areas of health research. Thanks.
And Marta.
Marta Winiarska. I'm leading Polish Union of Innovative Medical Biotech Companies. Companies focus on drug discovery, drug development, especially first-in-class, best-in-class, with Polish capital, but which needs support of many stakeholders around the Europe and also entire world. But we'll discuss it later. Yeah, and I think that's it.
Thank you. And the question is true for everybody, so it's the same Mentimeter as it was before. And you see the question here, what performance indicator, and I'll translate the question in a second, what performance indicator reflects a thriving life science ecosystem? Basically, what does it mean, a thriving ecosystem? Because I think that's what we sometimes struggle to say. We discussed a lot of solutions to a problem that we didn't define. Marta, what is a thriving ecosystem? How does good look like for you?
It's a really hard question. I think the ecosystem needs to bring the real support. And what does mean real support? The support which understands the specificity of all the actors which are in the sector as well. Academia, as well startups, and as well bigger companies, which are all of them responsible for the bringing finally to the market the drugs, new drugs for patients. So sometimes I feel that we are trying to build our ecosystem, our regulations based on kind of, I don't know, abstract assumptions, how we would like to reality be, not how is it in reality. So I think first we need to understand how the market works, what needs academia, what needs startups, how to translate R&D academia projects into business assets then, and how to bring then capital to develop those projects, and how to show those projects developed by mid-size enterprises or startups, how to show them to big pharma, to attract them with those projects, and how to bring them finally to the market. So good ecosystem means ecosystem which understand how the way looks like, how the reality looks like, and how they should create how public administration should create the tools support each step on this journey.
Fantastic. So we've started with a trade organization. We continue with the companies of smaller and bigger size. Why don't we start with you? So for you.
It's a very, very tough question. I agree with Marta, and especially if you talk with investor. Yeah, it's very hard to tell what is the performance indicators. In my opinion, of course, it depends on the area how you look, even on the ecosystem. Because if you are thinking about innovation, of course, science and innovation, you could think about how many publications we've got in how many patents granted. I don't know, but at the end, if we're thinking about something different, how we change the market, how we change the, how our solution could change thinking about some specific therapies. So everybody's got their own specific indicators. It is completely different for the academia, completely different for the companies. I will say nothing new, the funding, how we spend the money. Yeah, because once I heard, if you fund it, you will find it. And that's true. So the way how we spend the money, the way how we can spend the money, on the previous session we talked a lot about the time. And this is the only thing that we cannot buy. So we need to be, the time, the speed, how fast we act is also very, very important.
Jeremy.
Okay, I think the guys did a good job at starting at the beginning of the process, which is R&D, the number of new product approvals. We'll talk about key performance indicators. We're talking about what we measure to tell us if we're being successful. So obviously the number of ongoing clinical trials, the number of approved patents versus the number of patents applied for, etc. Moving into, I would say, let's say, collaborations between public and private sectors, okay? I think supply chain resilience is very important. So if we come with new innovative therapies, it's one thing to create a patent, but we need to commercialize these products and we need to commercialize them within the EU. Now, if we already have a problem, and I think from listening to some of the earlier sessions, you can see that we do. And what is the problem? The problem is supply chain resilience. We have 250 medicines made it onto the critical medicines list for the EU, and 80% of the API is actually manufactured in India and China. So when we get a new innovative therapy coming and developed in Europe, how are we going to commercialize it when we don't have the capability and the capacity within the EU for the API? So I think for me, the percentage of domestic API produced is very important. And again, I would move on through the phases to say that country-to-country collaboration is very important. So not just public to private sector, but also within the EU, having collaboration, cross-border collaboration. Regulatory reform is important, but we can reform the regulation, we can write the piece of paper, but the implementation of that is extremely important. How quickly can we implement the new regulations if they are reformed? I think we need to look at different regulatory pathways. So, for example, it won't be a surprise we produce insulin at Bioton. We can supply the entire European market. I do not want to have to go and spend millions and millions and millions on clinical trials for a product that's been in the market for 20 years. There's an established use pathway that we could take and supply the entire European Union with insulin. Now, some people will say, insulin's an old drug, it's not innovative, it's not. But, you know, we need to remember what they want to have, that as a baseline therapy, or more expensive products that are made in the US or made by US companies. So then I just to finish off on my point here, I would think, you know, from a regulatory reform perspective, I think patient access to medicines is very important. And what I mean by there is when we do have products EMA approved, how long does it take to get them from that part onto the reimbursement list in the various countries? And these are all things we can measure to reflect on our thriving life sciences ecosystem.
Thank you, and thank you also for taking it like end to end, and we would come to the different pieces of the value chain, because I think that there might be some notable differences between different types of companies, different sizes of companies, but there are some principles that you've outlined that would probably apply across the board. Tomek.
Thank you. So let me start from the disclaimer that I was not part of the previous session and I did not listen to it. So maybe certain things were discussed there already. So starting from this definition of this thriving life science ecosystem, I think it's pretty similar for me to what other speakers already mentioned, is that it would be great to have a system in which if there is a great idea, it has the reasonable chance of getting from early research up to the ready product in a good timing. And conversely, if there is an idea which is poor and has no chance or no value from the clinical or financial perspective, sorry, let it be killed quickly and early in the process, because I also know that this attrition rate is painful, and the earlier products which have no chance, the earlier they disappear from the pathway, the more space there is for others. So for that, we need a number of elements. Of course, many were mentioned. It includes the regulatory system. It includes the reimbursement system, which, of course, yes, it has to be agile. Absolutely, this is absolutely necessary. And also for us, when I look at it from the perspective of a public funder of research, we care equally about the return on investment. And we manage taxpayers' money. So to us, the return on investment is if that investment goes back to the citizens, including patients. It may be prevention, it may be treatment, it may be whatever measures which help citizens to stay healthy or as healthy as possible. So let me express this clearly. If the process is long and inefficient, it is also frustrating to us as the public funder of health research.
Thank you. There are some suggestions of how to measure, and this is about numbers of phase 1 trials, number of commercialized products, which I think some of you have mentioned, blockbuster partnering deals, market approvals. I think all of that is true, and these are important metrics. We've also talked about in the previous session, and I'm quite happy to have a bis repetita from that. That's not a problem at all. What are the solutions in order to get there? So if we know what we try to achieve, what is that 1 or 2 recommendations that you would make for the European Union that is now embarking on quite important reforms? Pharmaceutical legislation, life science strategy, upcoming Biotech Act, quite significant simplification exercise that is going on, the Critical Medicines Act, the European Research Strategy, and many, many others coming. I think Irene showed them on the slides today. What is it that in order to achieve what you've said, and then I'll try to translate it into some numbers, what is it that you would propose as a solution for the European Union to implement through one of these initiatives? And let's start again with you, Marta.
Again, very hard question, but I wrote down some points, what in my opinion, from my perspective, we should measure. And first point, it's translational output. How many academic projects results in IP transfer or spin-offs formation? And of course, here the solution is to create initiatives in order to network, to matchmake academia side and the business side, because I think that there are sometimes many interesting projects within universities or institutes, and it's really hard to go with those ideas to business and show what interesting data, what interesting project we have. And I have not ready answer what kind of initiatives it should be, but we should focus on how in reality we can change this, because as well for startup, as well for academic teams, it's really hard to go to bigger business and to discuss the cooperation. Clinical progress, how many locally developed therapies reach phase 1, 2 with local sponsors. And I would connect this point with my point for private investment levels. Are private investors willing to engage in early stage biotech? Because engaging private investors in those early stages, it's about good private-public partnership, because good public regulation, good public grant system, funding system, it's de-risking private investors. So I think it's absolutely crucial to make them willing invest in those early stage biotech. And time to commercial readiness, it's another point on my list. How long from proof of concept to the point where the licensing, sale or partnering is feasible? And it's about regulations, of course, but it's also about cooperation, because not every single European company would be able to bring alone to the first or second phase of clinical trials R&D projects. So again, networking and matchmaking, how to make it effective, and how we as a European Union can go to the local level and show the R&D projects to the partners who can accelerate them. And infrastructure scale, it's about facilities, laboratories, equipment for example, preclinical CROs who are the partners for the biotech companies focus on drug discovery and drug development, but of course also infrastructure, national European capabilities for pre-GMP, pilot GMP, clinical manufacturing. But what is here really important, that creating the grants ecosystem, we cannot await that this kind of infrastructure will be created by startups or mid-sized entrepreneurs, but we need to see entire ecosystem. We need to have this kind of infrastructure in entire ecosystem and think how to link good ideas, good R&D projects with this infrastructure, not await that the innovators will develop always this kind of infrastructure.
I think that points to the next multi-annual financial framework and how what funding tools and what is the scope of the funding could be addressed. For example, what you are saying about infrastructures that should not rely on grants but be sustainably funded, not just through services but also for their expansion and to enable support to startups and small companies. And the money for partnering differently in a more agile way, so new partnering tools, not necessarily institutional joint undertakings, but all types of partnering in the future. So that's what I'm hearing from you. So what Europe can do is just to provide the tools and the funding and to make sure that competitiveness aspects are funded through that, not just grants for research, but also for enabling the ecosystem, right? Is that what I'm hearing from you? Jeremy, before I would not ask Tomasz yet. Tomasz would then tell us what the Commission can do as opposed to what we want the Commission to do. Jeremy, what do you want the Commission to do?
I would like to see some harmonization. So across all levels, let's take funding, for example. The funding comes from the EU and it comes into each EU member state, and then each EU member state has its own number of different programs and mechanisms for releasing that funding into the startups, into the universities, etc. But there's no standard and consistent way. So I'd like to see some harmonization there. We recently put in an application for ABM for the EMA approval for our insulin, and we got awarded the actual project based on the points, but because of some financial criteria in the company, we couldn't access the money. The money was handed back to the EU. So it didn't get used, and here we are saying that we have, again, 80% of our APIs used in the EU in our 250 drugs on the critical medicines list come from China and India, and an EU company can't get approval to get it's insulin approved by the EMA. So that's important. Harmonization in the regulations. I think we need to simplify things massively. And we talked about going faster. I think that's very important. I think the regulations are starting to drive business decisions, so it's having a reverse negative impact. One example would be semaglutide, for example, and everyone in the room, I assume, has heard of Ozempic and semaglutide, and we know that the patent is expiring in around 2032. So companies like Bioton and other insulin companies are already starting to think how we go about producing this. And when we look at it, we say, okay, if I make a biosimilar version of semaglutide, I've got to go through a centralized pathway. It's going to take me forever, okay? And it's going to take a lot of money, and it'll probably never be commercialized. However, if I take the peptide version of that, I can go through a decentralized pathway. And what does that force us to do? It forces us to go back and buy the API from companies like Dr. Reddy's, etc., companies in India and China. And so the regulations are having some sort of negative reverse impact on the business decisions that businesses are making in terms of the products that they've developed. I talked earlier on, previously in a previous seminar about how we utilize the funding. And I think, we talked about the number of, let's say, new innovative projects, how many projects are in clinical phase 1, 2, 3, what's the speed we can get through those. I think the EU should take a step back and look at the key projects for the European Union, the key therapies that are required. So we're self-sustaining and not relying on India and China, and then look at how they can apply the funding in a standardized way to see that project from end to end. That would highly support the actual commercialization within the EU.
I think I hear you on the side of generic and biosimilar drugs, and it's true that most of the points that you've raised would apply there. I would like to also highlight that the innovation might require, because it needs to continue, would require also other measures. And on the manufacturing, most of the APIs for innovative drugs come from Europe and not necessarily India and China. And even the US is claiming that they are in trouble because they need to import from Europe the APIs rather than from other regions. Yet, modernization of manufacturing is not rewarded in any way. And I think that's true for both generic and innovative medicines. So there is something to be done on simplification. There is something to be done on incentives for a number of activities. Dominic, what do you think?
At the beginning, I not agree with you related with this API production in Europe and export.
We have figures.
Yeah, but I will tell you something. I don't know, everybody remember the COVID pandemic and the first COVID vaccine from BioNTech and Pfizer. I don't know if you remember also the time, because the vaccine was developed in Europe by BioNTech. Who received the COVID vaccine first? United States. Why? Because Pfizer produced it. So this is something that is also very important, especially if you look at very innovative therapies. I don't think that Europe is leading the way with the manufacturing capacity. And I'm sure about it. If you, for example, if we talk about the mRNA, no, it's not like that. If we talk about the oligonucleotides, the same. But we also need to think that especially about the supply chain. Okay, we can produce, for example, ibuprofen in Europe, but the solvent, the reagents, and all that stuff will come from China, India, and all that countries. So it's, I think, not that we expect it should how it should work. This is one thing. Second thing. What European Commission should think about it, of course, legislation is very important. And I will stay also with mRNA. FDA consider mRNA technology as a platform technology. European Union, if you talk with EMA about it, they don't even want to hear the platform technology, what it is. You know how it speeds up the process of clinical development of the drug. In Europe, we don't have such a solution. So this is very important. The funding, also how we fund the projects that are with high risk, especially at the beginning, because if we are talking about the biomanufacturing, so there will be no biomanufacturing in Europe if we don't have innovative programs that unfortunately requires public money, because without that, it will not happen. So everything is connected in every life cycle of the product development. So we need to look from the beginning and ending if you want to have the number of commercialization high, if we want to compete with the United States, China, or even Japan.
I've had this conversation recently with our research group, and I've asked them the question, how would you measure a progress towards a good ecosystem in Europe? And they said the following. So, for example, EMA, I would know that Europe succeeded because EMA is the first or the second where companies would turn for marketing authorization, because it has fantastic support, because it has fast-track approvals, because it looks at platforms, and indeed the platforms came about. There is a little bit about platform technology master files in the new pharmaceutical legislation, but mostly in relation to CMC and quality, not for the entire life cycle. So these are the things that people say. So EMA is the first or the second, and by the way, if the central approvals become very, very effective, then there would be less utilization of national approvals and variations and all of that. So that's first thing. The second, it is the length of the process for clinical trials, and say if we could be as fast as Spain, and Spain is the fastest in Europe, and better, as fast as China and the US in order to approve, that is the way to measure a successful Europe. That would require some changes in the legislation. That would require also more reliance. That would require more ethical reviews coordination, but that is possible. It is possible even today. The third one was around Class A investments, because, without that, you don't have really thriving biotechs. And the last one was around manufacturing. And here I would bring one of the points that you've made. It is about companies continuing investments because the investments are encouraged and rewarded. From the four that I mentioned, is there something that is missing in terms of, yes?
What is missing in terms of funding of manufacturing facilities is a law, European law, that excludes companies which are manufacturing drugs, biotech and chemical drugs from funding these companies that are located in highly developed areas. Normally, pharma industry is located not in the middle of nowhere, not in the fields, not in the forest, but close to the universities, close to people that can work in laboratories, in pharma manufacturing facilities, mostly with the high education. And this is actually the law that requires very fast redefinition, especially when we are talking about resilience, when we're talking about safety, about drug safety, health safety, and when we have substantially support development of manufacturing facilities to provide Europe at least with more critical products than those mentioned by Jeremy.
Thank you. Any comment from the panel? And I'll come back, Tomek, to you in a second. Anything that's missing from the four or in addition to what was just said?
I just add to that point, if I could, very quickly. I'm originally from Ireland. Again, every country has a different model. In Ireland, what they did to attract foreign direct investment in the pharmaceutical area was they obviously reduced the corporation tax rates. And then after that, what they did, or maybe in parallel, they made sure that they had the skilled workforces. So they partnered, the government partnered with the universities. And as Joanna there in the audience just said, the companies were built on the doorsteps of the universities. Okay, so literally those students coming out of the fourth or fifth year, whatever, they were guaranteed a job and they went straight into the industry. We have the National Research Institute of Biotech, which has scaled down models of biotech facilities, and those students go straight in there for 3 months, and then they go into the industry. So I agree, you're not going to find the biotech facilities in the middle of the forest or whatever. It needs to be, close to close access to the skills and the labor that's required. So completely agree with that point.
And it's not just Ireland, Singapore, I think, show exactly the same characteristics where actually, how did the company say they just roll out the red carpet to us and they help us to establish the facilities and there is a support to the points that somebody mentioned in the earlier session. There is a full administrative support. There is full support in establishing, in finding talents, in building the plans and in running the plans. And this is the way that goes. And I completely agree with you that we cannot apply the rule of structural funds and disadvantaged economic areas because this is not where these plans would be built. So while you are thinking, please feel free to send us your questions or to just raise your hand and I would come with the microphone. Shall we just come back to Tomek? So what is possible now? And do you have any suggestion for the member states? Because it's not just about the European Union, it's also about the countries. You can throw the ball to their court.
So should I be bold?
Please do, absolutely.
Then member states, please just help us. That would be it. We can take it one by one, of course. Regarding the funding, we are doing absolutely what we can. Our problem is, as usual, limited resources, limited funding. When you look at the total budgets, the budget for research managed by the European Union is probably around 5 to 10% of the total funding available for research in Europe. The rest is with private companies, foundations, and at the level of member states. So, as Irene mentioned this morning, we are now entering the discussion of the next financial framework, which will be valid for 7 years. And there will be absolutely fierce discussion about the budget dedicated to research. Because the union budget is not unlimited. You have to cut out, when you cut out from one part, the funding remains limited for another part. And we are funded from the contributions from member states. So it is always a fight for the allocation of resources to certain areas. That's why, to the extent possible, please help us getting the next framework program as large as possible. For the legislation, there are a number of initiatives going. Already the LifeScience strategy will be published early July, but it will be an umbrella communication. So it will announce certain actions, also hopefully answering to the calls for simplified regulatory processes and support. But the most tangible regulatory revisions will take place a bit later. Let me give you 2 examples. The first one will be the currently ongoing targeted evaluation of medical device regulation and in vitro medical device regulation. There was a public call, a public consultation with, I think, 600 submissions, and we are aware of the difficulties faced by the developers in relation to these 2 legislations, so this is going to be taken care of. And another legal act will be the so-called Biotech Act. Part of that will be legislative. And it will go broader than only health. So one of the idea and hope is that the Biotech Act will help clarify the inconsistencies, overlaps, contradictions, call it whatever you want, between certain pieces of legislations. For instance, between the pharma, GMO, medical devices, can be other types, pesticides and so on. It will also be preceded by the consultation and impact analysis. So at that stage, please do submit the issues that you see. And it will help us do things better compared to what we have right now. Then these will be high-level legislations. Of course, certain part of the implementation will be, again, in the hands of the member states, locally notified bodies who are scattered across Europe. It goes the same. I'm also a citizen, surely future patient and user of all these technologies. If all these processes for approval, reimbursement would be handled more centrally, it would facilitate the lives of everyone, including us in the EU, because we are feeling those frustrations and we are also facing certain limitations in our activities. That's why the way, as Magda suggested at a certain moment, if there are coalitions of the willing to get things done a certain way to the extent possible and allowed by the legislations, yeah, let's try these ways, absolutely.
So let me be a little bit controversial here. Let me be bold. Marta, Dominik, you hear Biotech Act and Jem. You hear Biotech Act, proposal 2026, 1.5 year of legislative proposal, 2 years of implementation, effects at the earliest 2029. Fast enough?
Hopefully I'm still alive to see it.
Not fast enough, but really connected in the future problems it would create. But we have problems now, and following your previous question, I would say that EU is as smart or unsmart, it's as effective or ineffective, or it's so strong or as weak as its member countries. And I'm pretty sure that at European level there is no awareness how some European Union initiatives are implemented in specific countries. Of course, I would give you example of Poland. And grant system today. For example, in US, when you say, okay, we have developing RNA therapy for glioblastoma, they ask you, okay, what data do you have? What team, yeah? What do you need to support your project? And what about ask you in Poland? Do you have 30% revenue matching your project costs? Okay, and this is this kind of mindset. We Polish public authorities, even they are on the daily basis cooperating with the European Union administration, they absolutely forget who stands behind most of innovative drugs and therapies. There are startups and there are mid-sized enterprises who then cooperate with big pharma and bring those solutions to the market. But we need to remember what kind of technologies we have in Poland, we have in Europe. Still, we have many companies who are developing small molecules which are absolutely first in class, which are absolutely best in class, which can change the paradigm of treating many diseases. And there is somebody in the government or in the public authorities who say, okay, we don't like to sponsor any small molecules because on the European level somebody didn't write it directly that this is biotechnology. Okay, but we are thinking about the goal, about treating patient effectively, or we think about the specific technology we want to support. So if we see our goal we want to achieve, then we can take the right paths to go there. And sometimes I feel that goal is here and path is here, and we really need to conduct the dialogue, not only to say, okay, tick, we did the dialogue with the business, but to understand how the business and how the market works, to bring the right solutions. And really, China is catching up fast. They approved to record, I think, 48 first-in-class therapies in 2023. They have mega funds, they have regulatory reform, global talent recruitment, everything. And this is the strategic decision. If we have goal here, just build the path there.
Health outcomes, continuity of supply, continuity of innovation. I think that's what we are talking about. Dominik, I turn to you for 1 minute and then we'll try to close.
I will be very fast. So I think what we need to do, I agree with Marta, there is a huge gap between the decision makers and the biotech business. It cannot be like that they don't hear what is needed. And this is the biggest issue. The biotech business says something and they, okay, nice, but we know better. And this is the biggest issue.
So we are adding to the list of wishes, listen to the business and work with us.
And also looking from the point of view of European Union at the national level, how their initiatives are implemented on the national levels, because with the numbers on the paper, maybe it looks good, but I think that maybe sometimes they should send their experts to talk with the companies who take grants or try to take grants from European funds, and I think better understand then where are the gaps.
I think a number of solutions, first performance indicators, but also a number of solutions came from this panel, from the previous discussion. I would like to thank you very much, and please join me in a round of applause for our panel. Thank you.